Hi everyone, Angus Campbell here. It's now into September 2021 and I'm back on the A70 Lightning, but you probably won't see this video published until after the first start on the Fury SS. But the reason why I've decided to do this now is that following on from the last video with the Gallic girls, where we identified a potential issue causing the low oil pressure when hot, i.e. the usual suspect, the timing side main bearing, then I've decided to put this back together and to take up Matt's offer of borrowing an oil pressure gauge, and we'll actually see exactly what's going on just to confirm that diagnosis. So what I'm going to do is, as I say, put this back together with the original oil pump. But also what I've done already is I've just what shall I say? I've just checked and resolved the end float on the crank, because certainly some of the noise that we were hearing when I was trying to check if there was play in the crank was it taking up end float, because there was too much end float. The end float is supposed to be 1.5 to 3 thou, and it was more like 10. But the good news is that on the A70, which is different to the A65, then they changed the design so that the shims are on the outside of the crankcase, and what you can see here is that behind the normal timing pinion there's a big flat metal thrust washer there, and the shims to adjust the end float sit behind this thrust washer. So you just pull off the timing pinion as you would normally on an A65, take that thrust washer out and adjust. Now what you need to bear in mind is that to take up end float with this arrangement, then because the shims are on the other side of the crankcase, to reduce the end float you actually take shims out, you don't put shims in. So that's what I've done. There were 2 shims in here, and I've actually taken one of those out. Shims are available in thicknesses of 3 thou, 5 thou and 10 thou. In fact, let me just show you one or two, because I do have some in stock, because they are available from New Old Stock in the States. So there they are. So I've got what I've got in stock now: 3 5 thou, 1 3 thou, and 2 10 thou. I can't remember where I got these from. It's a supplier that I've used fairly regularly in the US, and these were listed on eBay. So it means I've got some flexibility anyway. Anyway, I've removed one of the shims, and the end flow is now within the stated tolerance. So what I'll do now is I'll begin to put this back together. So we'll put the oil pump on with a new gasket, check the faces are all square, and then on the end of the crank there's a washer that sits then between the end of the timing pinion and the worm drive that screws onto here for the oil pump itself. And I did come across one slight problem. Again, let's go back to the bench, in that when I removed, there's the worm drive that screws on, left hand thread, and there's the locking nut that goes on the end of it with a tab washer, again left hand thread. But between the end of this and the timing pinion there's a washer, and when I took this apart the washer had fractured. I thought I heard a crack when I undid it, and this washer is unique to the A70 simply because of the thickness, because obviously we've got a different mechanism for taking up or adjusting end float behind the timing pinion itself. So you need a slightly thicker washer here because it sits a bit further onto the crank, the pinion does. And what I've found is that obviously these are unobtainable. They're a unique part number. But what I did was I got a couple of standard A65 stroke, and I believe these are the same as A10 as well. And the difference is that the A70 is thicker, and it's almost exactly twice the thickness of an A65 one. So we'll just use 2 of these. And when I measured them up, there's less than 20 thou difference. So I'm sure that's going to be okay. We'll make sure once we've fitted the worm drive that it is meshing properly and it's not the oil pump isn't going to catch on this. But we used 2 of those instead of 1 of those, and we should be okay then. I mean, quite what's caused that, I've no idea. And the only thing I have noticed is that it is chamfered on one side, the inner diameter, and perhaps originally, well, not originally, but when I first rebuilt the motor, perhaps I put it on the wrong way round. I think the chamfer has to go on the inside, and if it was the wrong way round, it might have cracked it when tightening up and I didn't notice. Anyway, that was another issue solved. So what I'll do now is I'll refit the worm drive, the oil pump with its new gasket, and then the locking nut with a new tab washer which we've got, and I'll bring you back. Obviously I've got the timing pinion back on, having changed the taken out the shim and obviously timed it up, but I'll just check that as well, so make sure these are in the correct position. Otherwise we could have a serious problem when I kick it over. Right, I'll bring you back shortly. Right, there we go. Pump back on with the 3 nuts torqued up to 10 pounds, and the worm drive and the locking nut back on, torqued up to what was it, 35 pounds I think, and all timed up. So next move, cover back on, the inner cover. So that's pretty straightforward. As I've said before, what you need to do with this when putting it on is you do need to wiggle the gear change shaft a little, so the plungers engage with the quadrant. But other than that, it's a straight on job. But oh yeah, remember as well, the don't forget to put in the kickstart quadrant. God, my brain's not working tonight at all, so remembering terms. Right, let's get the inner cover on. Okay, inner cover back on. Nothing special to note, really. As I say, the difficult bit really is just being able to jiggle the gear change shaft to engage the plungers in the quadrant. But this time it just went straight on, and just make sure you put the kickstart shaft in before you put the inner case on, because I think last time I did this, put it all together and then realised the shaft wasn't in, take it all apart again. The auto advance unit and the points are back on, but the auto advance unit is loose. But other than that, everything's on, cabled, routed properly, and up through the back and connected at the top here. So next job is timing the spark, which usually I forget to do before I put the outer cover on, but it's much easier to do with the outer cover off. So let's time the spark now. I won't show you that because you've seen it numerous times before in previous videos. So what I'll do is I'll bring you back once I've got the outer cover on, and as I say, all that is time the spark first, put on the kickstart return spring, and also make sure you've got the clutch cable connected to the roller cam on the other side of the inner cover. other than that, it's job done. So I'll bring you back when I've got all that together, and then we'll start to think about plumbing in the oil pressure gauge, which Matt is kindly loaning me, but I haven't got yet, so we'll make arrangements to bring that over. Right everybody, next night, and there we are. Timed it up, no problem, using the timing plug on the crankcase front, so static timing, and then basically outer cover on, kickstart on, gear change lever on, and finally footrest on the frame. So she's all back together. So next stop, get in touch with Matt and borrow his oil pressure gauge, and we'll get that plumbed in, and then we'll fire her up, see what it's like cold, and we'll take her for a run if the weather's okay. If not, we'll just let it run in the garage and see how the oil pressure fluctuates as the engine warms up. So it should be an interesting test. Right, Matt, I'm going to give you a call. Right, so in the last clip, you saw that the engine was running sweetly on tick over in the garage, just as a quick start-up test after I'd reassembled the right-hand timing covers. And as per the recent community tab post, you'll have seen as well that I took this bike and the Fury SS to the recent Cadwell weekend to do a bit more shakedown testing, and potentially as well with this to put on or install an oil pressure gauge in place of the oil pressure warning light switch, so we could check the oil pressure. Now, and that was a fail, as I reported in the community post, because when I first started this bike up at Cadwell, just to warm it up a bit and just to make sure there was no oil, it hadn't sumped any oil, or any sumped oil was returned to the tank, I noticed that by the side of this washer on this cylinder head nut, underneath the cylinder head nut, it was bubbling a little bit of oil. I noticed before I started it up actually there was a bit of a smear there, and I didn't quite know what it was. But it was obvious that the head gasket was leaking in some way, which was allowing a bit of pressure and oil to come up that stud. So obviously the nut was slack, and in attempting to tighten it up, the nut would tighten up and then it would loosen again. And that's just an indication of a stripped thread, and you just obviously hope to God that it's not the stud, but it's the nut. And luckily for us, it is the nut. And looking at some of the other nuts, it's not just that nut as well. The other nut had also been affected on that side. So these are the nuts that came with the studs. And I should have been warned originally that these are too damn soft, because using the correct size spanner, these nuts were still soft enough to be severely burred and marked by the spanner, you know, on all flats. Anyway, on removing these two nuts, these are the little shards of metal thread. They are from the nuts that I took out from in between the threads on the studs. And you can see there that there's metal missing. So these nuts are rubbish. So before we get on to fitting the oil pressure gauge onto the bike to do some oil pressure testing, ordered and purchased a new set of nuts, and these are 3/8 cycle BSA, but these are much better quality, and these are definitely the right steel to be head nuts. They're supposed to be manufactured from EN14B steel. It actually states that as a special requirement within the parts book. And these look nice, but they're wrong. So let's get those fitted, and then we need to do another test run. But probably before the next test run, as long as we can fit these and they do torque up properly, then we'll be okay. If these don't torque up properly, then we're into the head off again. So let's get these torqued up. If they torque up okay, then we'll fit the oil pressure gauge. I'm just looking around for it. I nearly thought I'd lost it then. Which Matt has kindly lent me with some fittings. It's only a small one, but it's just to give an indication. But within his fittings, we've got the correct fitting to replace the oil pressure warning light switch fitting with the taper BSP thread. So we'll get that fitted as well. But let's first of all get these sorted out. Right, new nuts on and torqued up, more importantly. So that's good. So let's get the oil pressure gauge on now. And this goes on, I'm sure most of you know, in place of that. And although it's only got a short line on it, we'll probably secure it on the frame somewhere on the down tube here, so we can see it just with a couple of tie wraps. Proper tie wraps, rubber of course, Dove Grey, but we'll get on with that now. Okay, oil pressure gauge line plumbed in and bled, and I didn't want to cut it because it's not mine, so we've just managed to tie it up so we can see it from the handlebars from the top. It's only a simple little gauge, but it's just to give us an indication of what's going on. So for the end of this video then, we'll just fire up from cold and see what sort of pressure we're getting then, and then in a future video we'll start doing some tests with respect to comparing the pressure at temperatures as the engine warms up. Goodness me! Right, well that test was initially encouraging. So when we first started up, it was going all the way around to here. That's 80. So it was going up to the oil pressure relief valve release pressure, 80 to 90. And that was at 1,000 revs or so. If I took it down to tick over sort of 750 RPM, then initially it settled down to about just there 50 or so, and I let it run for a while so the engine cases were well warmed up, and by the time I turned it off it was down to about here, which is 35. So anyway, very encouraging. Okay everyone, so right, we'll leave it there pending some further road tests to see how the pressure holds up when the motor gets up to full operating temperature. It was certainly getting quite warm there on the crankcases, as low as the crankcases, but certainly not full operating temperature anyway. So we've got a bit more work to do yet. But anyway, slightly encouraging. And even you know, at the highest temperature we got to before I turned it off, when we revved it, blimey, the pressure was going right up to 80 or so, even more pounds. As I say, yeah, slightly encouraged by that, so we'll see how we go. Right, so we'll leave it there. Next one, I think, will be on the Fury, as I've already started doing a bit of work on that to follow up what I think probably is the timing slipping. So we'll do some more runs on that to begin the sort of, or continue the shakedown. And so I'll see you all again soon with that one. So in the meantime, thanks very much as always for your interest. Comments, subscriptions, likes, etc. And I'll see you all again soon. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.